fake it till you make it. I mean, really, go up there and try and act like you have that confidence, because if you act like you have that confidence, your brain will start to believe it. And so if you go up there and you just try and shine and you just try and impact one person, then I feel like, that'll really help you kind of get over those nerves of, it's just one person. I don't have to make a difference in every single person in the room. It's just one. So that's really helped me have that mindset.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick. I'm so excited today. We got Jade Gordon with us virtually from California, but this intro will be a little bit different. She doesn't have a big, long bio because she is young and just a couple years removed from graduating from Clemson University with a degree in communications. What she does have is a passion and mission to develop positive leaders and build great teams. Jade and I share that passion. It's probably why we connected so much when we met in Iowa. Thank you to Jordan Montgomery for introducing us, and at a great event. We raised some money for charity. Jade got to speak a couple times, and I got to see her in action. It was so amazing to see someone so confident, so young on the stage, and following in her father's shadow, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Jade Gordon, welcome to the show.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for having me. I'm like you said, we share a passion. So I'm just excited for this conversation about leadership and just talking about, how we got to where we are, why we're so passionate. And I think it's going to be a great conversation.
I think so too. And it's been fun to watch you. We connected on Instagram, seeing your stories, how much fun you have in life with your parents, just in general. You bring a natural exuberance to life that I really enjoy watching. So let's dive right in. Jade, tell us a little bit about growing up. Obviously, you got Jon Gordon, famous author and speaker, as a father. Your mom, Catherine, is no slouch herself. Everyone just might know your dad. But we share that we tried to stay away from our fathers, and eventually we end up following in their footsteps. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
So growing up, I always, say to people are like, oh my gosh, what's it like growing up with the positive guy? And I always tell them it was so annoying. People would be like, your dad changed my life. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Because when you hear it from your parents or people that are close to you, it's just different from hearing it from someone else. And so, growing up, I literally would just tune them out. I didn't want to hear it. And as I, started to become an adult and I graduated college, and really hearing the stories of how people were like, you changed my life, you changed my, my children's life, I started to think, okay, wow, maybe there's something to this. Like maybe there is something there, why all these people love his books, love having him come talk. And so I was still kind of on my own journey of like, no, I really don't want to follow in his footsteps. And I graduated from Clemson with a degree in communication. I said, well, what am I going to do? And for a long time, I thought I wanted to do sports broadcast journalism, things like that. And so I realized that I didn't really want to do that. That wasn't a passion of mine. So I came out here to LA, and my dad said, you know what? I believe everyone needs to work in the service industry. You need to learn how to serve and sacrifice, and that'll help. And so I said, okay. And so I applied at Nobu Malibu, which is a world famous restaurant. And I really learned how to serve people. And they're at that restaurant, they're entitled, they treat you like you're subhuman. And it was just an experience. I learned, I grew so much. I really had to figure out how to adapt to my environment. And even though I was very low on the totem pole, I was trying to figure out, how can I lead in my position? How can I just impact the people around me? And I started to implement the things that my dad talks about, and it changed the whole dynamic at work. And so then when I, in my journey of my faith, I wasn't leading myself. And so I was like, well, how can I lead others in the way that I want to if I'm not even doing what I should be doing? And so I really sat down and I thought, God, what am I here to do? What is my mission? What is my passion? And what is my purpose? And he said, exactly what your dad does. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that, because everyone's going to be like, oh, you're just doing it because your dad does it. And so I sat down with him and I said, I think this is something I want to do. I think I want to change the world through leadership, positivity, culture. team like bonding and things like that, because I didn't really have that growing up, especially an athlete in sports. And so he was like, okay, let's see what that looks like. And so we sat down and I said, I think I want to do it to teens. And so I started out, now I've been doing it to schools and trying to impact the younger generation, because I wish I had someone, again, aside from my father, that was younger in age to me, that I could relate to, that could inspire me and, teach me the lessons that all these people know, but I didn't at a young age. And so I sat down, and my dad, being my dad, he, comes in the next day. He's like, I already lined up a couple talks for you. And I was like, what? No, I'm not ready. I just decided I was going to do this. And he goes, go for it. Just try it out. See if you even like it. You may not even like it. And so I went to my local high school girls lacrosse team and I spoke to them. And it was like, it wasn't even me. It was like the Holy Spirit used me as a vessel. And when I left, it wasn't even like I was like, wow, I did good. It was like, wow, this is what I was called to do. I can just feel it in my bones. And so after that, I was like, okay. And then it was off to the races. And now I've got a bunch of engagements lined up. And it's not even that I'm like, okay, this is, I just want to do this for my job. It's like, no, I want to make an impact. I want to, the younger generation that I've been talking to, they're struggling. There's so much, mental health issues, especially with COVID, all the things that they've gone through. And it's like, if I can be that voice, especially a woman, because there's not a lot of women in leadership that are speakers. I'm like, if I can be that, especially even at my young age, how many people can I impact in the next 10 years? And my dad started speaking when he was 35 and I'm 23. So he's like, think about what you'll be doing when you're my age. And so I think it's really cool to see, just following in his footsteps. And people have said, well, why are you qualified? Why should you be able to do that? And I really allowed that fear to hold me back. But then when I started to think about it, it's like, I've learned this stuff, even though I tuned them out a lot. I've learned this stuff my whole life. I've lived by these principles, whether or not I knew it, but I've lived this every day. And so I feel like I'm qualified to teach people. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now.
That's awesome. I do have a question about imposter syndrome, and you're kind of bringing that up right there. So I want to talk about that in a minute. But I do want to say, like, it's so hard to listen to our parents, or even for me, like spouses, like those closest to us. I think there's a great quote out there, is that you're never a prophet in your own land. So I'm just imagining those interactions with your dad and your mom and you growing up, and how some wise words just went in one ear and out the other. And then upon reflection, you're like, oh my gosh, he was right. And so you go through with that and you continue to lean in, and now you're doing some great things because you've had those reflections. There was a story you told at the Iowa event about a woman at Nobu that really spoke to you and spoke to your soul and really helped you. I want to see if you would be willing to tell that story, because it was so cool.
Yeah. So like I said, I was working at Nobu Malibu, and it's, a famous restaurant, and I wasn't fulfilled there, right? I was like, okay, I'm serving other people, which is great. I'm learning that. But what am I doing that's honoring God? Like, what am I doing that's living out my purpose? And I really, again, struggled for a long time. And I kind of thought that I wanted to start speaking, but I was kind of like, I don't really know. And so when I one day was working, I walked downstairs and there's this woman, and she was talking to her friend, and she said, tell her. And the woman said, no, I'm not going to say anything. And I obviously overheard that. And so I walked up and I said, how can I help you? And she said, well, I just want to let you know, I came all the way here from North Carolina just to come to this restaurant. And God has blessed me, and I wanted to bless someone else. And I came here prepared to tip my waiter a lot of money. But I just have to tell you that we had awful service, and I'm very disappointed. And I said, I'm so sorry. I can get a manager if you want to tell them. And she said, no, it's okay. I just wanted to let somebody know. It's just a shame. And I said, I'm so sorry. I said, but well, you said you're from North Carolina. I actually went to Clemson in South Carolina. And she said, no way. Like, her tone just changed immediately. She said, no way. What are you doing out here? I said, well, I graduated and I thought, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. So I guess the best place is to go to LA and figure it out. And we started talking, and she asked me, she said, are you a Christian? And I said, yes, ma'am, I am. And she said, "Can I pray for you?" I said, "I would love that." So there I am. I'm standing there with this woman that I've never met in my entire life. She doesn't know anything about me except for the fact that I went to Clemson and I moved out here to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so we start praying, and she has her hand on my shoulder and she says, "God, I just want to pray for this woman standing right here. I can tell she's fearful. I can tell she's not stepping into her calling and the things that you've called her to do and her purpose and her passion. I know she's fearful, but if you would just allow her to step into faith, to have faith, to live out that purpose, to honor and serve you in all that she does. I see her speaking all over the world, traveling all over the world, impacting people in places she never would have thought she would have gone." And to me, that was crazy because at the time I had this little thought in my head, well, maybe I could do what my dad does, traveling around the country, speaking to people, impacting them. But again, the fear was holding me back. I'm not good enough. My dad already does this. People are going to think, well, she's only doing it because her dad's doing it. And in that moment, it really she spoke to me and we both started crying. And afterwards she was like, "Can I hug you?" And I said, "Please." And so she hugged me and she said, "Baby, do not be afraid. Step into that. You are made for so much more than this." And like, I wish I had her information. I would have, to be able to thank her because it really pushed me into what I'm doing now. But we sometimes think, I tell people at that moment, it spoke to me, but it wasn't like I was like, okay, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to start speaking. I still allowed that fear to hold me back, but I didn't forget that conversation. So when I started to think, you know what? I'm ready. Like, I'm ready for something more. God, show me what that is. I remembered that conversation that I had with that woman and the way it just, impacted me at the time, but also in that moment, it allowed me to push myself out of my comfort zone to be able to step into my calling. And so again, I wish I had her information because that was, I believe she said, God, I believe God had me come all the way out here to have crappy service just to tell you that.
Man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, so many things from that, but you said yes to the prayer. First of all, you could have been like, "No, I'm at work. I don't want to be seen." And then all of a sudden you both start crying, hugging. Like, it could have been like a scene, right? But it was a magical moment for you. I just have a feeling that if you keep telling this story, she's going to find you and you'll see each other again. That's so cool. All right, so you've spoken a little bit about the fear. We talked about, I brought up imposter syndrome. Let's talk about that for a minute. You're 23 years old. I know one of the first talks you gave was to the Clemson baseball team. That's where you went to school. You were probably in class with some of these guys. So I can't imagine the nerves you would have going into that room. And then all the other stages that you've been on since then. I got a little behind the scenes look. I saw your dad pray over you before you went on stage in Iowa, which is just so. I have 3 daughters, so that was like just really cool to see. What advice do you have for those not feeling qualified to lead in this moment in any way, shape, or form? Because I've just seen you step into your gifts in a couple different instances, and I know you're fearful. I watched you before and then watched you on stage and you killed it. Talk to us about that and how people can feel more qualified and get rid of that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, it really comes down to my faith. In the imposter syndrome, what I've been talking to my dad about is I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I feel like I have to be perfect. I feel like to impact those people, I have to do what I'm saying so perfectly. I have to, the way I'm articulating it, it has to be perfect. And I've had a couple mentors and even my dad say, but you don't have to be perfect. As long as you can get that message to them, this may be the only, positive thing that they ever hear from a speaker. So it's not like you have to go up there and be perfect. And again, I'm comparing myself to my dad, who's been doing it for years, who, people are like, your dad's amazing. He's changed my life. And I'm thinking, well, I can't get up on stage and tank because they're going to be like, oh, that's embarrassing. Like, I guess she's not, going to be as good as her father. And so I really had to sit down and think, okay, first off, I'm just starting out. I don't have like 15 years under my belt like my dad does. This is, I think you saw my maybe 8th talk. I'm like, I've only been doing this for a couple months. I can't be so hard on myself. And then I really had to sit there and think, okay, this is not me. I mean, I don't know, like for people, for me personally, a person of faith, it's like I have now let the Holy Spirit just work through me, because if I go up there and I try and do it myself, I'm going to be so nervous. I'm going to be so fearful. But if I think, okay, God, use me as a vessel, like I'm just here to share my story, to share these principles with people, to impact them in any way that I can. If I can do that, just for one person, then that's all that matters. Maybe somebody's not going to like the way I say things, but there might be one person that does. And even if I mess up, even if I say the wrong thing, even if I say something stupid, if they can just understand the message of what I'm trying to say, then that makes what I'm doing worth it. And so really for me, it's not even like, I think I don't want to mess up. I have to be perfect. But I've changed my mindset to be like, this is not about me. This is for somebody else. And that's allowed me to have that faith of, I'm doing this because I feel like I'm called to do this. If I wasn't called to do it, then maybe I shouldn't, but I feel like I'm called to do it. So for somebody else, I would just encourage them, go up, fake it till you make it. I mean, really, go up there and try and act like you have that confidence, because if you act like you have that confidence, your brain will start to believe it. And so if you go up there and you just try and shine and you just try and impact one person, then I feel like, that'll really help you kind of get over those nerves of, it's just one person. I don't have to make a difference in every single person in the room. It's just one. So that's really helped me have that mindset.
That's really good. And I think what you're doing is faithing it until you make it, not faking it, right? Because you leaned into your faith a lot and trying to impact just one person. And I think I've made that mistake in the past as well, where I'm like, I need to please everyone in this room, whether it was 10 people, 100 people, or 1,000 people. What a fool's errand. Like, I know there's been a stage that your dad's been on, and he's one of the most famous speakers, famous authors in the world. And there's been people that have walked out of the room and gone, what an idiot. What, did you hear that joke he tried to tell? That was awful. Right? But the majority of the people, or even just one person, which I know he focused on as well, was impacted, and it could have changed their life. And those are the people coming up to you and saying, hey, your dad changed my life. And that's who he's focused on, I know, and that's who you're focused on. So I would just encourage everyone, like you just have, is don't focus on trying to please the entire room. Think about this. The presidency, over 50% of people really don't like the president. And I'm not just talking about this president. I'm talking about almost every president. So they're not trying to please everyone. They're trying to get things done. So, well, hopefully they are. But that's a different topic for a different day. All right. One of my favorite things your dad has said is life is not a marathon. It's a series of sprints combined with a boxing match. I so resonate with that quote. What does that mean to you? I don't know how many times you've heard it. Maybe it was like a nursery rhyme to you, or maybe it's something he just recently started saying, but what does that mean to you?
I mean, yeah, I hear it all the time. And so I've kind of, I used to tune it out, every time he would say, like, Dad, I don't care. But now that I'm doing this work, I mean, it's so true. It's in my life. It's not, I feel like we oftentimes try and do so much, but it's like, no, it's just these little sprints. It's these little things that we're going to do to, further ourselves, further other people, impact people. And again, it's going back to the same thing of a marathon. I'm not trying to impact, I want to impact everyone in the room, but I can't focus on impacting every single person. It's just that marathon, that sprint of that one person, or those two people, or those three people. It's always focusing on that. And it's also like, how can I get 1% better? That sprint, I'm sprinting, I'm going for it. What can I do to constantly elevate myself to the next level so that not only I'm getting better, but I'm impacting everyone around me? And that's the thing about positivity, is it doesn't just make us better, it makes everyone around us better. So it's, how can I constantly be sprinting to do those little things to just hopefully grow and learn and teach people. And I feel like that's, what he's saying in that is, it's not a marathon. It's these little series of sprints where you're just focusing on one little thing at a time, one person at a time, one impact, one difference at a time.
I love that. So my beginning career was a financial advisor, and I then was training financial advisors for the last, 15 years or so. And there's sales and there's cold calls, warm calls, etc. What you're speaking to is repetition. Those are the sprints that you're speaking to. And you can't expect to go on stage your first time and just nailed it without thinking of all the little things you did wrong and that you're going to improve on the next time. So that's that 1% better. I'll share a little story that is always kind of funny. I always shared it in training classes because it was a time that I screwed up. Well, I didn't even screw up. I just wasn't that good yet. So one of my first calls was to one of my college roommates to sit down and see if I could be of help financial planning wise. And I call him up, I go through my language, and he laughs. And he goes, Kosnick, you reading off a effing script? And I was like, no, actually I got that memorized. And he goes, well, you sound like a robot. I'm like, cool. So you guys say, sit down with me or what? And it was a good friend, so I could talk like that. But it was an epiphany for me right after that. It was like, I sound like a robot. How do I not sound like a robot? How do I make this more authentic to me? So I had some good language, a good script, but I wasn't authentic. One of my good friends just called me out. So that's a repetition. So I got to keep making those dials, keep going through my language, keep perfecting it, just like you're doing on stage as you do talk after talk after talk. So those sprints are repetitions. I love it.
Yeah, love that.
All right, last thing about your parents, and we're going to all be all about you. What's your favorite lesson from your parents? Could be your mom or dad.
That's a really hard question because
I knew it would be. I just had to ask.
As much as I hate to admit it, growing up, I was like, my parents are never right. Now that I'm an adult, I'm like, my parents have been right about everything. I ask them for advice all the time. They've taught me so many great lessons. So just to pick one, man, I would say just my parents always teach me to strive to be better. It's not even that they say, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's, are you every day actively trying to get better? Whether it's, working out or it's, a better food choice or little things. It's how are you in a positive way going to impact yourself every single day. And so that's what I always think. I always have this mindset of, okay, well, what can I do today to be better? What can I do today to impact someone around me? Because that'll make me better. If I make someone else better, that also enhances, my growth. And so I think that's probably the biggest lesson, especially that I'm using now with my, starting my career and, post college, is just how can I be better every day? And it's not about, again, being perfect. It's even if I mess up or I make mistakes, I'm trying to be better. So I would say that's probably one.
I love it. I would just encourage you to never forget it, since I'm about 20 years older. Not quite, but almost. That still holds true. To this day, as you become a parent, then you're becoming the example to continue to get better every single day so that your kids always see that as well. And I know your parents are just awesome examples for you. All right. So what's the telescope versus microscope analogy that I've heard you reference? Because I love it.
So usually when I teach about the power of positive leadership, I talk about your positive leaders, they lead with vision and purpose. So I always use the analogy of a telescope and a microscope. So your telescope is your big picture vision of where you want to go and why you want to go there. And your microscope are your zoomed focus actions that you're going to take each day to achieve that goal. And it's really important to have both, because if you just have your telescope and you just have, your big picture vision of where you want to go and why you want to go there, and you're not doing the little things you need to do to achieve that, you're not going to achieve that goal. And if you're doing the little things, but you're forgetting that big picture vision, you're going to get burned out. So it's really important to have both of those. So I always tell people about when I was in high school and my dad brought me to, Clemson, and I was a high school lacrosse player. And so me and my dad, our dream was I was going to go play D1 lacrosse in college. And he brought me to Clemson and he spoke to the team. And I fell in love immediately. I stepped on campus, the football team, I saw the facility, just the atmosphere of Clemson. It's just amazing. And I said to him, I said, Dad, I think I want to go here. And he was like, distraught because, growing up, he said when he held me in the womb, like when I came out of the womb, he said, she's going to be a lacrosse player. And so that was always the dream. And so I really broke his heart when I told him I was going to go to Clemson. But he said, it's Clemson, so I'll get over it. Clemson's the best. And so that was my big picture vision of I'm going to go to Clemson. But I really wasn't a good student. I really didn't do my, schoolwork. I didn't really study for tests. I hated writing papers. And so I thought, okay, if this is my big picture vision, what are the Zoom focused actions that I'm going to take to achieve that? So I started studying for the SAT, the ACT. I was like, how can I get my GPA up? I started doing extracurriculars, joining clubs to be able to differentiate myself from other people. Since I wasn't going to be an athlete, I was going to be a non-athletic regular person. So I had to do those things to separate myself from other people. And so that was the little things that I did to get there. And sometimes I think we always think, okay, if I do those little things, I'm always going to achieve that goal, right? Which that can be the case. But in my case, I actually got waitlisted. So I was like, okay, I did the things, but at least I did the things I needed to achieve that goal, right? I did what I needed to do. I know that I gave it my all. And I just had to trust at that point in God. And I said, God, I really feel like this is where I'm supposed to go. If I'm not supposed to go to Clemson, then that's okay, because I know I did the work and I know that you'll, make a way for me and I'll figure out where I'm supposed to be. You'll have me where I'm supposed to be. And I remember just being on the wait list. I was so frustrated. All my friends were getting into their colleges. And one day, I was just praying to God, I really want to go to Clemson, but I will understand if that's not where I'm supposed to be. And one day my parents called me. I was at school, and my teacher, they actually reached out to my teacher and they said, can you have Jade step outside? And I was like, am I in trouble? Like, what's going on? And so I stepped outside, and my parents called me and they were crying and they're like, you got in. And I really know that that was God, because I got into the communications program and they only allowed 300 students into the major, but I was waitlisted. So I said, okay, God, I'm really, really trusting you. Like, I believe that this is where I'm supposed to be, but I would have never applied. I would have never got in if I wouldn't have done the things that I needed to do. And so it's also about doing the things that we need to do, but also having that trust and that faith. But those are the, Zoom focused actions and our big picture vision that we have to have both. So I always teach young kids about that, adults.
Well, it's so good. It's a lesson for anyone that can understand it at this point, whether they're teenagers or 60 plus years old. It's a great lesson. So I think about you making that choice not to play lacrosse and breaking your dad's heart. That is really hard for a young lady to do. How did you go about that? Like, why were you so strong in your conviction? Because I know you were a great lacrosse player and you could have played somewhere at a D1 level, maybe, perhaps not Clemson, but somewhere. Tell us about that, because I know there's a lot of women or a lot of young men even that could benefit from some of the courage you showed in kind of saying no to your dad.
Yeah. So it all started, I would say, I grew up playing lacrosse. So I started in the third grade. My dad played at Cornell. And so he, got me in really young, and I was in high school and I played on a travel club team. Like, that was a very serious travel club team. I played basically all year round. And I'm so grateful for it, because I met a lot of my, friends that I'll have for the rest of my life. But everybody was so into, where they were going to go. They wanted to be recruited so badly. And for me, it was kind of like, I'm just having fun. I just want to be with my friends. I want to play the game. I wasn't so focused on that. And I would go out and I would play. And I know it was a God thing, because I obviously wasn't supposed to go play in college. But every time the coaches were watching, I would mess up. And my dad was obviously, frustrated. He's like, you're a great player, but how come when the coaches are watching, you make a mistake? And I was like, I don't know. At the time, I was obviously also frustrated as well, because I'm like, well, everybody's getting recruited. I want to also maybe get recruited too. And as my friends started to get recruited, I felt like God was just saying, I don't want you to play in college, because all of them it was a passion for them. It was like they knew that that's what they wanted to do. They woke up every morning and they practiced and they did this and they did that. And I was like, I go out, I practice, and then I go and I hang out with my friends and I play and I have fun. And when I went to Clemson, it was my junior year, and I was actually being recruited by a school, a very good school. And I had a call with the coach at that game, at the Clemson game. And there was no service, because, the whole stadium is packed there. It's not very good service. And so I was on the phone with her and the call dropped. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, I want to go here. Like, this is where it's USC, University of Southern California. And so I was like, it's a great program. Like, I had a call with the coach, and I was like, okay, God, I'm trusting in you. Like, if this is not where I'm supposed to go, I'm not supposed to go there. And at that time, I was like kind of iffy about Clemson. Like, I hadn't really seen it. I had just seen like a little bit of the town. And then after the call dropped, we walked out onto the field. We were on the sideline, and just the atmosphere and feeling the camaraderie of the students, the players, the coaches, I was sold. And I was like, okay, wow, I'm supposed to go here. I feel it in my bones. And my dad, it was really tough and really painful for him, because that was like a dream that he had, as a parent, to have this vision for your kids, like, oh, she's going to go play at USC, she's going to go play, at a great school. And I said, no, I want to go to Clemson. And we did have so many conversations about it, where he was like, Jade, like, you've played lacrosse basically your whole life to go and play in college. And I said, I know, Dad, but compared to my friends, it's not what I want to do. I don't want to play in college. The next 4 years, I want to spend it, focusing on my major or developing, relationships with other people, not just my teammates. Like, this is what I want for my life. And it wasn't like he was automatically like, okay, yeah, great. He struggled with it. We had many talks about it. He's like, are you sure? And I had other schools that were like, well, if you decide you don't want to go to Clemson, like, we have a spot for you on the team. And I was like, okay, well, I have that as a backup if I ever want to go there. But I just felt like I was supposed to go to Clemson. And so we took a couple months, and he processed everything. And now looking back, he's like, I'm so glad you went to Clemson. Like, that's where you were supposed to go. You were not supposed to play in college. You would have been miserable. And a lot of my friends who went and played in college, they either quit playing or they were miserable the whole time. And so my dad, seeing that, was like, I'm so glad you made that decision, because you did what was best for you. And that was what God had for you. That was his plan. And so I encourage people, if you don't want to play a sport, maybe just stick with it. If you're having fun, if it's how you make friends. But if you decide you don't want to play in college, and that's the right thing, not, oh, I just want to go party and I want to go do whatever I want. If it's really not a passion of yours, don't feel like you have to, because then you'll be resentful. But it's never, a lot of people love playing, college sports. So if you're like iffy about it, I say go for it. You can always, decide you don't want to do it. But for me, I just felt like God was pulling me in a different direction. And my dad eventually accepted that.
Oh, that's great. It's a great lesson for both parents and kids, because I actually went to college to continue playing football. My intentions were completely wrong. I had no intention really to continue, or to graduate from college, I should say. It was weird. I look back on that in high school. My parents were not college graduates either. And so for me, that wasn't put on me, right? So I went to school to continue playing a sport. And then when I got to school, all these life lessons happened. I'm also ADD. So school just wasn't the great environment for me. I stopped playing football. I actually played a couple semesters of lacrosse because I still wanted to play sport. And after that, I was checked out of school, and then just had to blaze my own path from there. Now, all my younger siblings are all four-year graduates. I'm the only one that didn't graduate, but I think you touched on some great points. The one I really want to stress for parents is make it about your kids, not about yourself and your dreams. Like, my girls are so into dance right now. My wife was a dancer all through youth growing up, and they love it. And I asked them the other day about a competition team, because they have competition tryouts. They're into it pretty heavy. So they're not in it for just fun. They're actually competing as well. But they have their priorities straight. I said, would you rather be in the more challenging competitive class or be with your friends? And the two oldest ones immediately said, be with our friends. So they're not just doing it just to compete, or thinking that mom or dad want them to be at this elite level. They're still about it for their friends. So I see so many dads, so many moms kind of imposing their dreams on their kids, and it really kind of screws them up or disenfranchises them towards sports, or towards the love of sport anyhow, in the future. So great advice.
Yeah, I also feel like if it's the parent that wants that to happen, most of the time the child gets burned out, and then they lose their, love of the sport. And that just, makes everything go away.
Yeah, very good, very true. All right, so there's a bunch of books behind your head. I know that your dad wrote. I don't want it to be necessarily those, but I was thinking about some female leaders listening to us speak right now. What books do you think female leaders, whether your dad wrote them or not, should they have in their library or should they be reading right now?
I'll be honest with you. I really don't read. I only read fiction. So if you have any recommendations for people, I would love to start reading. I just got, Atomic Habits and things like that to start creating better habits in my life, but nothing really about leadership. So in my dad's books, I've read a couple of them, the ones that I've needed to, but I don't really have any specific ones. So if you have any that you'd like to share, I'd like to hear
Well, I'll
them.
start with The Power of Positive Leadership behind you. I think that's one that everyone should read. I think there's also one of the most underrated traits in leadership is emotional intelligence. And so there's Intelligence 2.0 that I would pick up. There's also a book called Positive Intelligence that's a different spin on emotional intelligence and some of the saboteurs that can get into our heads. And then I could go on a big long list of some of the classics like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Good to Great, Think and Grow Rich, are all classics that you'll find in some of the most famous leaders' top 10 lists. The Alchemist, a lot of different things. Some of these books were written before, equality was a bigger thing. So like they'll all be referencing he, him. So I just warn women leaders that are reading as like, look, just replace it to her, she, because this was written 100 years ago or whatever it might be. Like Think and Grow Rich is one of those books.
Okay, yeah, I definitely need to add this to my library.
So there you go. Got a few on your list now.
Yeah, but I would definitely say for me, the garden, because when you struggle with that, it's not necessarily in leadership, but when you struggle with negative thoughts and distortion, when you're trying to do something to lead other people, but we always have negative thoughts coming in. So just, learning how like we'll be attacked at the place of our identity and learning how to deal with those negative things. And so that's a book actually of my dad's that really helped me. And of course, like you said, The Power of Positive Leadership, just learning how to be, encourage people, lead them, and The Hard Hat, how to just serve and sacrifice. So those are 3 that obviously I've read of my dad's, but I'd like to, branch out and hear what other people have to say. Because again, even though I believe that everything my dad says is true and great, sometimes it's better to hear it from other people, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, I get it. I had a lot of that growing up. My dad and I are very similar people, so we butted heads, and that's why I tried to stay away from him early on. And then as I matured and realized that I wanted to provide the same lifestyle for my family that he did for ours, I got more attracted to the industry that he was in, and then particularly as a leader. So I get it. You're never the prophet in your own land.
Yep, exactly.
Well, what are some of the fiction books that you've read that you would recommend? And do you glean leadership thoughts or positive stuff from fiction, even though you're not reading like a directive leadership book?
No, they're more like I just watched the movie where the crawdads sing, and
Oh,
so
yeah.
I just watched the movie, but that's not even in the world of like leadership. That's just about like romance and things like that. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's in the same realm of that.
So you're just reading to that as like a mental reprieve, and that's kind of your entertainment, is what I would say.
Yeah, because I really am trying to steer away from watching TV because I feel like that, not that it's a waste of time, because reading a book that's not of anything of leadership or anything like that could also be seen as a waste of time, but at least your eyes are not glued to a screen where you're like mindlessly watching something. You're still having your brain just like kind of read these things, having mental pictures in your head. And so one of my friends said, like, just start reading more, even if it's not like ways to better yourself, which I want to start reading those books. I just haven't gotten it yet. It's just reading to keep your brain like going and sharp, because if you're sitting on the couch just watching TV all day or watching a movie, it's really not beneficial to you. So I used to read all the time. It was kind of like a little mental escape where I could just go into this Little World, reading Harry Potter, things like that. But I would definitely say like I need to start reading more because I've seen all these podcasts and all these people who are millionaires and leadership people, and they're like, read a book. Like you should always be reading a book on how to better yourself. So I'm glad you actually brought that up because I'm gonna go through and write down all those books and I'm gonna get them and put them in my library.
Well, I know you got a lot of travel coming up here starting next week, so you can start with one and move forward. I would say audio as well is a life hack. If you can glean some of the lessons while listening versus just reading, especially like if you're in the car, I'm always listening to a podcast or an audiobook. So some of like the autobiographies I read by listening, Matthew McConaughey's book, same with Kevin Hart's book, they both narrate their books. They're both entertaining people. One's hilarious and one is just a great actor and has a smooth Southern draw. So they were very pleasant to listen to versus if I'm reading a leadership book, something on self-betterment, I'm usually reading it because I can highlight, I can take notes, and I can extrapolate those lessons right away.
I love that. Yeah, I'm actually reading In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day right now by Mark Batterson. And so it's obviously a Christian book, but I need to get more into like, directive leadership.
Yeah. Well, there's always leadership lessons if you're looking for them. And sometimes it's how not to be a leader too.
That's very true. That's very true.
We see that in the news almost every day.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, Jade, it's been such a pleasure to have you on today, and it's been an awesome conversation. Where can the audience follow and find you?
You can follow me on Instagram at Jade Gordon 11, Twitter Jade_Gordon 11 as well. And I'm working on getting my website up, Jade Gordon Speaks. And so once I have that up, I'll have all those links and ways that you can contact me directly and stuff like that. So I'll have that up hopefully very soon.
Well, everyone follow her. Like I said, you'll see her exuberance for life and the joy she has, whether it's where you're dancing around your family last night, out on the street, just enjoying life in general with family and friends is usually what you can find Jade doing. And then obviously as she gets the website up and you see her speaking more and more, you're going to see so many positive posts, positive leadership thoughts, and really just leaning into those gifts that God gave you. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah. And if you want to go on YouTube, I have a bunch of clips of me speaking. If anybody's interested in seeing those are up on my YouTube as well.
Awesome. Follow her on YouTube, everybody. Until next time, everyone, have a great day.